Greetings, Hailsa and Ave. This is Mel Fleming. I am the leader of the Phoenix, Arizona chapter of the Satanic International Network. I'm making this video to address a historical topic that I'm going to blend with a little bit of Satanism and a little bit of postmodernism. As you know, the majority of Satanists in this world, or at least in the United States, are people who are mainly Caucasian or Caucasian European. You really don't see a lot of people of color or Americans with African descent as Satanists. And this is not to say that we should now go on a campaign, to recruit people of color. I'm not against sharing my faith if someone would ask, but I don't believe I'm going on some sort of a campaign to hunt people down like the evangelical Christians. But when I run across Americans with African descent and they object to my being a Satanist, I have to remind them of one aspect. It was Christianity that brought our ancestors as slaves. It wasn't Judaism, wasn't Islam, wasn't Buddhism. No other religion inspired people to go in long boats across the Atlantic Ocean to the African continent and get slaves. It was Christianity. Christianity inspired people to do this. Christianity inspired 500 years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow and segregation. Christianity was used by slave owners who used Bible verses such as, "The slave must obey and love his master," or, "If a slave does not obey his master, he must be punished with many stripes." The slave owners did not use the Bible to inspire. They used it to create fear and intimidation. And the slaves, having no form of education whatsoever, had no other alternative but to obey because of fear of punishment. Because why? Because it was biblically inspired. No other religion used that sort of intimidation or historical methods to keep slaves. Now, this is not to say that ancient Jews didn't have slaves, but if you notice in their history, they only had slaves from people that they conquered in war. The same with Islam. Buddhists really didn't have slaves. They had more servants. But every culture has had its own tradition of indentured servitude and some slavery. And in the history of the United States, when slaves were first brought, it wasn't thought that slavery would be a lifetime occupation. Several slaves actually were paid, along with indentured servants, and two of them actually became free. One owned a plantation and actually had other servants and slaves. I found this out through the PBS program, The History Detectives. I was kind of shocked, but I wasn't surprised. In fact, during the Civil War, there were black slavers, which is a kind of a dishonorable historical reference. But when I run across Christians who are Americans of African descent, I remind them of this, that no other religion crossed the Atlantic Ocean into Africa to bring thousands and thousands of people. No other religion was used to do that. No other religion was used for segregation but Christianity. And people used Bible verses to enforce those beliefs. No other faith did that. So if you're a person of color and you are a Satanist of whatever path you are, deistic, atheistic, theistic, I don't care, and you run across another American with African descent who objects to your religion, remind them of that fact. And also remind them that it wasn't Jesus who set them free. It was the Civil War that set them free. It was the Emancipation Proclamation that set them free. because Lincoln really didn't care about slavery that much. He was more concerned with fixing the Union. In fact, it was his hope that Americans with African descent, after they got their freedom, would probably go back to Africa. And if they still object, you've done your best. But I remind you that in order to be intellectually honest, we have to take a deep look at our history, especially where Christianity is concerned. And this is why I am very happy that the founding fathers were very deistic, not theistic, and there are many quotes about government not mixing with religion. In the Treaty of Tripoli, James Madison wrote that the United States was not founded in any sense upon the Christian religion. George Washington said that religion causes more disparage and acrimony than anything else. Another founding father said to believe Christianity is to escape all logic and reason. A lighthouse has more function than a church. Look at the writings of Thomas Jefferson as well. He owned slaves, but he didn't use Christianity to bind them. In fact, he had no harsh taskmasters or overseers, but other plantation owners did. And for 500 years, this faith that so many Americans of African descent flock to, go to churches to, and proclaim Jesus as their Savior, for some reason are either ignorant or just don't want to accept the fact that it was Christianity that enslaved you in the first place. And had it not been for Christianity, chances are you may not be Christian at all. Chances are you might have been living still in Africa. But I don't want to speculate or hypothesize or postulate on that because I can't prove that. But if you are an American with African descent, a person of color, and you're a Satanist, be proud, be happy. And don't worry about the objections because you have history and historical argument on your side. There was no such thing as a Satanist slave owner. There was no such thing as a Satanist who owned a slave ship. I've never heard of it, and I don't think you'll ever find it. It was only Christianity. Christianity brought the slaves. Christianity kept the slaves for over 500 years, and that's a fact that cannot be escaped. And if you try to escape it, you're being intellectually dishonest and you're appealing to your own emotions. And if you, and I would say this to these people, live in such a self-hypnotic state of denial, then that is very sad and says a lot about you. Ave and hail Satan. This is Mel Fleming II, leader of the Satanic International Network, Phoenix chapter. Love you all. Bye-bye.